For 7 seasons, he was the man everybody in Hazzard County trusted to fix what was broken. Grease on his hands, a wisecrack always loaded and ready, he ran the only garage in a town where cars got wrecked on a weekly basis. Audiences knew him as Cooter Davenport, the good-natured mechanic who kept the General Lee running no matter how many times it went airborne. But the man behind that role, Ben Jones, lived a life so much bigger and stranger than the character that made him famous. He went from a childhood without electricity to a hit television show, then walked away from Hollywood entirely to become a sitting member of the United States Congress. When he died on August 9, 2026, at the age of 84, the world remembered him as Cooter. His family, sorting through what he left behind, found themselves confronting something far more personal, a financial picture that didn't match the size of the life he had lived, and it left more than one of them in tears. It's rare for a public figure to live one truly remarkable chapter, let alone several. Most actors who land a role as beloved as Cooter Davenport spend the rest of their careers trying to recreate that lightning. Jones went a completely different direction, and in doing so, he built a life story that says as much about resilience and reinvention as it does about Hollywood fame. To understand why his family's grief was tangled up with something as unexpected as financial disappointment, it helps to start at the very beginning, long before anyone in Hazzard County ever needed their car towed. There is nothing about Ben Jones's early life that suggests where it would eventually lead. He was born Benjamin Lewis Jones on August 30th, 1941, in Tarboro, North Carolina, and grew up primarily in Portsmouth, Virginia. His father worked the rails for the Atlantic Coast Line Railroad, and the family's home near the docks had no electricity and no indoor plumbing. It was the kind of poverty that shapes a person permanently: barefoot summers, tight budgets, and a mother who held the household together while raising her children with almost nothing to spare. Jones later described that upbringing candidly in his own writing, never romanticizing it, but also never treating it as a wound he needed to hide. What that childhood produced, though, wasn't bitterness. It produced drive. Jones made his way through Woodrow Wilson High School and eventually enrolled at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where an unexpected spark changed the direction of his entire life. He stepped into a college theater rehearsal and never looked back. He joined the Carolina Playmakers, the university's respected theater troupe, and discovered a passion for performance that would carry him through the next 6 decades. To pay his way through school, he took work in summer stock productions and performed in an outdoor historical drama in Cherokee, North Carolina, gaining his first real experience acting in front of a live crowd. After finishing his studies, Jones moved to Atlanta at the end of the 1960s and threw himself into the city's theater scene, working with several local companies and appearing in well over 100 stage productions. That period gave him a foundation that few television actors ever get: years of live performance, of learning to hold an audience's attention without a script that could be edited or res-hot. It was training that would matter enormously once the cameras started rolling. Jones's break into film came through a low-budget 1975 movie about Southern bootleggers, directed by G.Y. Waldron and narrated by country singer Waylon Jennings. It wasn't a major hit, but it caught the right eyes. The director had bigger plans for the concept, and when it evolved into a television pitch for CBS, Jones was one of the earliest actors brought in to read for a part. That show became the Dukes of Hazzard, which debuted on CBS in January 1979. Jones landed the role of Cooter Davenport, the mechanic and tow truck driver who ran the only garage in the fictional town of Hazzard County, Georgia. It was, in a way, the perfect part for the moment. A town built around car chases and constant wrecks needed somebody reliable to patch everything back together, and Cooter became that steady, likable presence. Every time the Duke boys crashed the General Lee, Cooter was already sliding out from underneath some other vehicle, ready to lend a hand. Jones stayed with the series for all 141 episodes across its 7-season run, which lasted until early 1985. At its peak, the show was a genuine ratings phenomenon, finishing as the second most-watched program on American television during the 1979 to 1980 season, trailing only Dallas. Cooter, with his easy Southern charm and his CB radio chatter, became one of the most beloved supporting characters on the show. the kind of role that audiences looked forward to seeing every single week. Fame did not erase the rougher parts of who Jones was. He had already been married 3 times by the time he turned 40 and had gone through years of heavy drinking before finally getting sober at age 36. He wrote about that turning point later with striking honesty, once describing his sobriety in a way that captured just how close he had come to losing everything. Even his commitment to the role had limits. During the show's second season, Jones stepped away briefly over a disagreement about whether his character should be clean-shaven, and other actors filled in for Cooter while the dispute got sorted out. He returned once it was resolved, and the clean-shaven look stuck for the rest of the series. It was a small moment, but a telling one. Jones held opinions strongly, and he wasn't afraid to walk away from something he cared about if he felt strongly enough about a principle, even a seemingly minor one. When the Dukes of Hazzard wrapped in 1985, most actors from a hit show faced the same uphill battle, convincing audiences and casting directors to see them as something other than the character that made them famous. Jones didn't fight that battle in the usual way. Instead of chasing new auditions, he ran for a seat in the United States House of Representatives. His first campaign came in 1986 when he challenged Georgia Republican incumbent Pat Swindle for the state's 4th congressional district. Most people expected a respectable but ultimately unsuccessful run from a celebrity name. Jones came far closer than anyone anticipated, pulling in 47% of the vote in a loss that signaled real staying power. 2 years later, in 1988, he ran again, and this time won decisively, defeating Swindle with 60% of the vote. On January 3, 1989, Ben Jones was sworn into the 101st Congress as a Democratic representative from Georgia. The man who had spent years playing a small-town garage mechanic on television was now genuinely serving in Washington, sitting on committees dealing with public works, transportation, and merchant marine and fisheries issues. Practical, hands-on concerns that matched the working-class identity he had built both on screen and in real life. He won re-election narrowly in 1990 and continued serving with the same plain-spoken style that had defined his public persona from the start. His time in Congress ended not because of any scandal but because of redistricting. After the 1990 census reshaped Georgia's congressional map, Jones's own home was moved into a different district, and he lost the 1992 Democratic primary in that newly redrawn territory. Rather than quietly stepping away from politics, he ran once more in 1994, this time against Newt Gingrich, who was then the House Minority Whip and about to become Speaker of the House. He had virtually no chance of winning, and he lost badly, but the decision to run anyway said something about who he was, a man willing to fight a battle simply because he believed it needed to be fought. After leaving Washington, Jones returned to the world that had made him famous in the first place, but this time as a businessman rather than an actor. In 1999, he and his wife Alma Viator opened Cooter's Place, a museum and gift shop devoted entirely to the Dukes of Hazzard, in Sperryville, Virginia. It worked almost immediately. Longtime fans traveled from all over to browse memorabilia and meet the man who had played Cooter, and the business eventually expanded into additional locations in Pigeon Forge and Nashville, Tennessee, along with another site in Luray, Virginia. The scale of the fan devotion became clear at Dukes Fest, the reunion events Jones and Viator organized over the years. A 2006 gathering in Nashville drew more than 100,000 attendees from around the world, a turnout that local media described as the largest fan event the city had ever hosted. It illustrated just how deeply the show had embedded itself in American pop culture and how effectively Jones had positioned himself as its most visible caretaker. Music remained a constant thread through these years as well. Jones performed regularly with Cooter's Garage Band at concerts and fan gatherings across the country, releasing more than a dozen albums over the decades, including one in 2020 titled, Play Me an Old Song. In 2007, Random House published his memoir, Redneck Boy in the Promised Land, The Confessions of Crazy Cooter, a book that went far beyond typical celebrity memoirs. Jones wrote candidly about his impoverished childhood, his struggles with alcoholism, and his improbable political career, and he also revealed that he had taken part in civil rights sit-ins during the 1960s, a detail that added an unexpected layer of depth to a public image most people associated purely with a fictional Southern mechanic. Taken together, those post-congressional decades show a man who refused to let one role, however beloved, become the final word on his life. He kept building, kept performing, and kept showing up for the fans who had never stopped caring about Hazzard County. On August 9, 2026, a Sunday, Ben Jones settled into his favorite chair at his home in Virginia, waiting for the Atlanta Braves to play the New York Yankees. He never got to see the game start. His wife, Alma Viator, later shared on social media that he had suffered a massive heart attack while sitting there, resting and waiting for the broadcast to begin. Tributes poured in almost immediately. Tom Wopat, who had played Luke Duke across all 7 seasons of the original series, called Jones a devoted friend and said the cast had lost one of their own. Viator's own words about her husband captured the outpouring that followed. She described the fullness of the life they had shared together and the depth of the love between them, sentiments that resonated with fans who had followed Jones for decades. He was survived by Viator, his wife since 1992, along with his children, daughter Rachel, from an earlier marriage, daughter Jean, and son Walker, born in 1983. He was also stepfather to 3 more children through his marriage to Viator. In the days following his death, as tributes continued to circulate, attention naturally turned to the practical matters of his estate. What emerged was a story more complicated than the public image of a beloved, larger-than-life celebrity might suggest. Some financial trackers had long placed Jones's net worth at around $500,000, a figure that reflects a career built across several fields that rarely produce enormous wealth, character acting, even on a hit show, and a congressional salary that was modest by any modern standard. Other estimates, accounting for the value of the Cooter's Place brand, the couple's Rappahannock County property purchased in 1998, and the various business interests tied to Dukes Fest and merchandise sales, place the figure closer to $2 million. Biography genre. His music, meanwhile, kept him connected to audiences well into his final years, giving him a way to stay active and engaged rather than simply trading on past fame. And the Cooter's Place Museum stand as the most tangible, lasting piece of what he and Viator built together, a business constructed from nothing, without the corporate backing that typically supports celebrity ventures, sustained instead by genuine relationships with fans built over decades. When the Braves game he never got to watch finally ended that Sunday evening in August 2026, a man who had escaped childhood poverty near the railroad tracks of Portsmouth and built an extraordinary life across more than 8 decades had already left the room. His family was left to process both the grief of losing him and the complicated emotions that come when a life of such fullness produces a financial legacy smaller than the legend surrounding it. But dollar figures were never really the measure of Ben Jones. His true legacy lives in the 141 episodes he gave to a show that still airs around the world, in the 4 years he spent representing his Georgia constituents in Congress, in the thousands of fans who shook his hand at Cooter's Place over the years, in a memoir that told the truth about a complicated life, and in the sobriety that made everything that followed possible. What he left behind moved his family to tears not because it was too small, but because it forced them to reckon with just how much of himself he had given away, to every audience, every voter, and every fan who needed crazy Cooter to still be out there somewhere, wrench in hand, keeping things running. Ben Jones spent 84 years proving that a single role, no matter how beloved, never has to be the whole story of a life. He was a mechanic who never actually worked on cars for a living, a congressman who never stopped sounding like a small-town Southerner, and a museum owner who understood better than almost anyone that nostalgia, handled with sincerity, could become something worth building a life around. The number attached to his estate will fade from memory soon enough. The man who earned it, in all his contradictions and reinventions, is not likely to fade nearly as quickly.